Alright guys, now that we have learned how to do DSS off a lot of Law's moves, I think this is the best time to talk about what's coming up next. Law isn't limited into just using punishers and crush moves as defensive options. Law has another ace up his sleeve, which are his parries. Parries will make the opponent think twice before they try to hit Law when they think Law is in a bad situation. So in this video, we're gonna cover everything about Law's parries, including setups and situations on when to use them. So before we begin, I just want to point out that Law has two kinds of parries. The first one would be his regular parry, which is done by doing back 1+3 or back 2+4. Note that I only called this regular because other characters with parries or reversals have the same input notation. But you will learn later that this parry isn't so regular after all. The second one would be Law's fake step parry, which is done by doing back 1+2. More on this later. The first parry I want to talk about is the regular parry, back 1+3 or back 2+4. Which input you do is up to you, just pick the one which is more comfortable for you to do. But for simplicity, I will be using the back 1+3 notation in this video. Unlike other parries and reversals, this one comes out pretty fast and has a wide active window. This will successfully parry moves from the 2nd to the 11th frame. This works on both punches and kicks and could be done from both standing and crouching. After a successful parry, Law has an advantage of 5 frames to play with. But the real neat stuff comes when you transition this parry into DSS. And this is done by pressing back forward immediately after the parry. If you can't do it consistently, my tip is to still press the back forward input regardless of the parry being successful or not. So the back 1+3 back forward should be done together as one command. So in the case you successfully parry an attack, all that's left for you to do is to press a button from DSS. A successful DSS transition from the parry gives Law a massive frame advantage of 14 frames to make moves like DSS1 and DSS2 guaranteed. With these DSS moves guaranteed after a successful parry, this effectively makes Law's parry into an unchickenable reversal. Now if you don't know what unchickenable means, it means that this reversal can't be reversed or chickened, unlike other reversals.
Chicken. Chicken. Chicken.
In the open field, it's recommended to go with DSS1 into the guaranteed legend kick after a successful parry, for a guaranteed 35 damage. But at the wall, it's better to do DSS2 for a wall splat. Also note that when either player is ski charged, the DSS2 will land as a counter hit for a nice launch. Okay, so before I forget to mention this, because Law's DSS2 wall splats, then it can be used for wall and balcony breaks. But the much better wall and balcony breaker is DSS1-4. Because it's gonna work if you parry something at this far away from the wall. Just look at the damage potential of a single parry. With DSS2, the wall needs to be very close to the opponent's back. As you can see, we can't get the balcony break if we're this far away. So here's a common question asked about Law's parry. Since DSS2 is 14 frames and 3+4-4 being also at 14 frames, shouldn't 3+4-4 also be guaranteed after a parry? Well, to answer that question, it has been removed since it was deemed to be very cheap. Here in this clip, you can see Just Frame James doing it to MYK and see for yourself what Ares had to say about this.
Interrupting the punch parry, and that's the new launcher off of a parry. So cheap. The punch parry from James. Man, James really playing well right now, not allowing MYK to even get started.
Okay, so moving on. You can also do other DSS moves from the parry, but DSS1 and DSS2 are the best guaranteed options to do. but this parry is only active for a brief amount of time, which means that it's vulnerable to delayed hits. Remember that a whiff parry can be punished really hard, so I advise you to not get predictable with it, because the opponent can just launch a whiff parry every time they predict it. So the next parry is Lost Fake Step Parry, which is done by back 1+2. But unlike the other parry, this one could only be done from a standing position. When you do this, Law will enter his fake step stance and you will be able to parry only punches for the entire duration of the fake step animation. Note that if Law wasn't able to parry a punch, all moves from DSS except DSS2 are still available from the stance. That is because DSS2 is now replaced with a while standing 2. If the parry was successful, Law can then do 4 different options. The first option, which is the most commonly used one, is the 4 option. This kick knocks the opponent down for a free forward 3+4, or you can also do a dragon tail. And as an added bonus, if you land this move off axis, it then guarantees a free 3+4-4. Like for example, if you parry the last hit of Nina's forward 2-1-2, she's gonna end up off axis and you can get a combo. Also, landing this move as a counter hit will have the same effect. Of course, this only happens if either player was key charged. Next option is the free option. This option is somewhat useful when the wall is angled at Law's right side, because we can score an angled wall splat. And the next option is the 2 option. This puts the opponent at a fallback stun, giving Law a massive frame advantage to mix the opponent up. But note that nothing is guaranteed because they can still choose to block either mid or low during the stun animation. And here is the most interesting option in my opinion. The 1 option turns them around in back turn, in which they are left with 2 options to defend against your attacks. They could either turn around standing, which is done by holding back, or they could turn around crouching, which is done by holding down back. If they choose to turn around standing, note that they don't have enough time to turn around and block 12 frame highs. So the best options I found are a forward 1-3, which is guaranteed if they turn around standing, or you could try a banana peel for that +4 frame advantage. The neat stuff happens when they turn around crouching, because if they do, then you can get a full junkyard on their back. At the wall, it's a different situation because we aim to score a wall splat. For the 12 frame high, it's better to do 3-4 to get a wall splat when they turn around standing. As for when they turn around crouching, you can still get a free junkyard, as long as they aren't literally hugging the wall, just like what I'm about to show you right now. In that case, we have to use back 2-1. But note that you may get an angled wall splat depending on the situation. Remember that I said that the back 1+2 parry only works on punches, which means that the opponent can still hit you with kicks. So you gotta watch out when the opponent has far-reaching kick launchers, like for example Lee's forward 3, or Lee's blaze kick, and of course don't forget Law's 3+4-4. Law's back 1+2 parry also happens to cover one of back 1+3's weaknesses, which is that it lasts longer, so you can use this in catching delayed punches. Remember that I said punches, not kicks. Like almost every other parry or reversal in the game, Law's parries are still vulnerable to hits that are not punches or kicks. So you gotta watch out for elbows and knees, especially against the characters that have these kinds of launchers, because they can easily kill Law's parry. Aside from those, parries are also vulnerable to lows. For example, snake edges could also be used to counter parries. And throws work well too. And I actually almost forgot this. Law's parries don't work on swords and bats. Alright guys, so before I end this video, I just want to talk about on how to use parries, and also show you some setups for them. As we already know, parries are the fastest moves in the game. In fact, Law's parries are only 2 and 3 frames fast, which are a lot faster than generic 10 frame jabs. So if you want to find the perfect situation on when to use Law's parries, all we need to do is do a little math. And for this example, we want to use Law's back 1+3 parry, in which, as we already know, it becomes active during frame number 2. And since most moves in the game start off from 10 frames and onwards, so what we want to do is 10 frames minus 2 frames equals 8, which means that the perfect situation when Law can parry the most moves with his back 1+3 is when he is at -8, or when the opponent is at +8. Since the parry is active for 9 frames, this means that Law is able to parry moves ranging from 10 to 19 frames when he is at -8. And also don't forget about back 1+2, which becomes active at frame number 3. So the perfect situation on when to use this is 10 minus 3 equals 7, or when Law is at a disadvantage of -7. Which means that the sweet spot for Law's parries is around -7 to -8. Well, I hope you get the point. So that leaves us with the question, when is Law at around -7 or -8 frames? First is, we can make the opponent block a move which is somewhat heavily minus on block. Like for example, Law's down forward 2, which is around -7. So if we do a parry after making them block that, then we are able to parry moves ranging from 9 to 18 frames. Also note that using back 1+3 at -9 will shift the frame range into 11 to 20 frames. As we can see in the video, Law is unable to parry 10 frame jabs, but is still able to parry 11 frame magic force. Okay, so for the next part, I just want to show you guys some parry bait setups which I like to use. Note that I haven't included all the setup moves, but if you want to know all about them, then you might want to check out Law's frame data for moves which are close to -7 and -8 frames. The second situation you want to use parries for is when you get hit by a move which puts the opponent at a frame advantage. In simple terms, when the opponent just hit you with a move, you can use a parry if he's about to hit you with another move. Like for example, Jin hits you with his down back 4, most likely he's gonna follow up with a high or a mid after the low down back 4. You can use a parry if you think that the opponent will continue to pressure you with a higher mid. Opponents usually like to continue their pressure after hitting you with a poke, so you can catch them with parries if they get too predictable. So another reason to use parries is when you don't want to guess the high or mid mix-up of a string. Like for example Lee's while standing 2 strings, in which he can do while standing 2-4 which ends with a high, and while standing 2-3 which ends with a mid. And another example would be Miguel's forward 2 strings. You know how online Miguels like to use forward 2-1 mid stage, and then when you start ducking, they'll start using the mid option, forward 2-2. As long as the high and mid come out at the same timing, you can use a parry to beat both options with only one option. But remember to not be predictable with your parries as well, because they can be baited and launched. And the last reason I can think about is when you want to punish safe moves which can only be punished by parrying. An example of this is Fang's down back 2-2-2 string. We all have seen this annoying string in which when we try to block the whole string and punish, we're only gonna find out that it's safe, and we end up being the one getting hit instead. Remember that we can parry the last hit of down back 2-2-2. Some moves are even parryable on reaction, such as King and Armor King's Capital Punishment. You can also use parries as a quick reaction to unblockables as long as the unblockables are punches and kicks. Okay, so that's it for this video. Do like and subscribe if you think my video is very helpful. Also let me know if you have any questions through the comments. I'll be happy to answer them all.